Chairs No Waiting, episode number 319. Neil Brower interview, The Darlings, 2004. This is part 2. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by the fine folks over at Weaver's Department Store. Drop by over at Weaver's and check out, there's a new book they got over there called A Cuban in Mayberry. Looking back at America's hometown. Great book. I have one myself. It's a pretty good one. Also, T-shirts, all kinds of things there at Weaver's. Drop by weaversdepartmentstore.com and check them out. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners just like you. The executive producer of Two Chairs No Waiting, number 319, is Michael Oliver. Michael Oliver, my friend, my Michael. He is one of our tribute artists. Matter of fact, this is him right here.
This is Gomer's cousin, Goober.
Oh,
Says you're listening
him.
to Two Chairs No Waiting. Judy, Judy, Judy.
All right, that's not him. That was Goober. Here's Gomer.
This here's Gomer Pyle, and you're listening to Two Chairs No Waiting podcast. Shazam!
So you got both cousins. We want to thank Michael for being executive producer. He'll probably pull that back now that I gave Tim a little bit of airtime there. Now, Michael's a great guy. It's great to have him with us as one of the tribute artists you'll see at Mayberry events around the country portraying Gomer Pyle. All right, folks. Last week, we had a great first part of the Neil Brower interviews The Darlings 2004, where we got to hear just a little bit about their career as they were getting started and all the different activities and things that they had gone through. And we get to continue that this week. We're going to be hearing from Rodney and Doug Dillard, Mitch Jane, Dean Webb, and Maggie Peterson. That's basically the Darling Boys and Charlene. The only one missing is of course, Denver Pyle Briscoe, who had already passed away at this point. And folks, these are some amazing little bits of history. I hope you are enjoying as much as I am. Mayberry history here. So tonight we're going to be hearing a little bit more about how the Darling Boys, the Dillards, actually made it to Hollywood, the things they were going through. We heard some of that in the beginnings last week, and this is a little closer to the time they actually started the Andy Griffith Show. And then we move into not only them being chosen to be on the Andy Griffith Show, but also Maggie and how she was chosen. So I know you're going to enjoy this, and I just want to thank Neil so much for allowing me to use these interviews because they are priceless. So let's go ahead and get this show on the road. So here we are with part 2 of the Neil Brower interview with the Dillards and Maggie Peterson.
I remember Douglas used to come home. Remember you go to sleep in that chair, you play music, and you come home in your suit and lay down in the easy chair, and Mother would wake you up, time to go to work, and this is how he would go. He would go in the same suit, and he'd be wrinkled, and Mother says, "Your suit's all wrinkled." He says, "Oh, let's press it."
Rodney was wiping his shirt
we could
down.
see that wasn't going to be a very good career for him. So we decided to go, and we went to St. Louis, where we become acquainted through John Harford, through a fellow who had a recording studio. His name was Peter Weston. I'm like one of those old guys. I start reminiscing. Yeah, Peter Weston lived over on 47th Street. Yeah, he had that little thing between his... But anyway, Doug and I and Dean went into his place, and we cut several songs, didn't we? And Dean overdubbed the bass on it. Dean's a fine bass player. And we took this tape down, and we were hanging out with Mitch because that was the place to hang out in town because none of us liked hanging out in bars, and Mitch's place was as close to that as we want to get. So we used to hang out at Mitch's house and play, and Mitch was learning to play. And I think one time we decided we were going to go to California, and Mitch says, "Wait, I'll quit my job and go with you." So there was a period of time when we all quit what we were doing, and there was about, a 2-month period before we actually got enough money to go to California. So here we were, all living at Mitch's house. I had hocked everything I had. I had a 54 Plymouth convertible, pink, that had Bluegrass Special. You can read mine, I was a young kid. And I sold it for $60. And we got very hungry, and Mitch would come in and said, "Look, I got a turkey." And I got to looking at it, and it wasn't a wild turkey. And it turned out he'd been shooting the guy over the hills, his turkey flock. He'd been raiding it and killing those turkeys. And we've been living on that and wild mushrooms.
hadn't tried it.
So, and this is really, I'm giving you the facts. Nobody knows this. We've never really told this to anybody. So we finally got enough money together that we thought that we could go to Hollywood, which was $9.50. And as Mitch said, we weren't used to large sums of money like that. We ran through it in about a month. But we got as far as Oklahoma City. And let me tell you something. You kids out in the audience, don't do anything that we've done. I mean, my kid grew up to be a cop because he saw the way I grew up. So we got as far as Oklahoma City. Mitch decided he couldn't take it anymore after 3 days on the road with us, and he went to Dallas, Texas, and left Dean and I and Douglas in Oklahoma City. We were staying in oil fields, sleeping in an old 55 Cadillac, you know, with the transmission hump in it. And we'd all take turns flipping coins to see who slept on the floor with the transmission hump. And we woke up in the morning, the first morning we were there, and we were covered with red dust, weren't we? We were unrecognizable. And
Still had the same suit on.
so we decided we should do something, so we had $1.25 left. And I got out my suit, put it on, got a haircut with the last $1.25. That was back when you could buy a haircut for $1.25. And I went in and started trying to get us jobs. And we'd go to and the whole thing about it was very demeaning because we'd go into Manpower, right? Manpower, you have Manpower here. It's a similar where transients go, you know, when they're trying to make a buck to get a bottle of wine, right? And we would sit in there in line like this, and they all knew the other guys. And all the transients and all the winos would get jobs, and we'd still be sitting there.
Red dust off.
Yeah, should have washed the red dust off. Yeah. So we did. We got some jobs, and I think we were on television that 1 week more than we've ever been, because they'd say, "Meanwhile, another worker unloads license plates." And so the news was following us around, and we were setting up voting machines, and all, which is really neat because it really gave me confidence in the voting system. Because if there was somebody I didn't like, I just flicked a little switch in the back and he'd vote for the other guy. Because you get bored setting up so many voting machines. So we had checked into a YMCA. And Doug and I and Dean were in there, and it was just like the hotel scene in the Darling Family. We would check in there, and we wired one room, and we wired 2 beds together with coat hangers. Because the first night we just tried to move them together, and the guy sleeping in the middle ended up part of him on the floor, you know. And we had the end room, which happened to be the thermostat that controlled the whole floor. And Dean likes to sleep like where you hang meat, you know. And he would always keep the thermostat turned way down. And in the middle of the night, you started hearing these people down the hall going, "What's going on? I'm freezing." And he'd be pounding on the door to get Dean to turn the thermostat. So we stayed there and ran up such a bill at the YMCA. We didn't know what we were going to do. And we knew we'd probably almost come to the end of our rope because Dean and I were fighting over crackers that someone had thrown away in the waste can. Remember that? Remember we were counting the crackers? And you looked at my cracker and says,
I'm
"Wait."
going to throw this in. Rodney took our last dollar and we got a haircut. He went and got a haircut so he could look presentable so he could get us jobs.
I just told him that about 15 minutes ago.
No, you didn't.
Okay, Doug. So anyway, what happened is we went down to this folk music club. Is this boring you? Because, you know, people talk about their lives, and then I wrote, and then I was, and then I. The eyes have it.
You make this up.
No.
You couldn't make this up.
No, and we went in this club that they, this little folk music club, and that's where the Smothers and different people came in. We went in and just started picking and getting to know the person, and went up and played on the stage, and the man who owned the place was gracious and nice enough to say, "Would you guys like to work a week here?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be great." And he said, "Well, what would you have to have?" And I said, "Well, would $75 a week be too much?" And he says, "I'll pay you $300." Good guy, Pop Brainerd. Anyway, when Mitch found out that we got a job, he came back. Is that right? Dean, is that right?
Yeah, more or less.
So we did. So I went down and picked Mitch.
So he gave us 400.
So we got Mitch back, and that's where we developed what we finally did when we went to Hollywood. Anyway, we made enough money to get to L.A. And did you have other questions you wanted to ask?
This is where I was going to go. $400 looked like a mountain of money at that time.
I did.
How Dick Link found out about you? And
Oh, there's plenty before there.
the condensed version.
Okay. Got to Hollywood, checked into a crummy motel, went down to the. You remember I was a kid out of the Ozarks, and we checked into the Melrose Motel, and I was sick. I was running a high fever, and these guys says, "We're going to go out and see what we can find." And they left me there with the walls very thin, and there was noises like I never heard before in my life. They came and got me. We went to this little place called the Ash Grove, which was sort of the petri dish of folk culture, where everybody talked big college talk, like, yeah, what do you think of the existentialist dilemma? I don't know, where does he live? And they were that kind of people, who were doing that thing. And so we walked in there, and now, you're going to have to help me with this. We just pulled our instruments out, didn't we, Dean? Or were you asked, or what?
No, I had already seen them. There used to be a little magazine they put out called The Broadside. And we were in St. Louis. I was able to visit Peter Weston. They were kind of into all that. And I got a copy of that from him. So I had read this thing about the Greenbrier Boys, which is a New York City bluegrass group, that they were going to be playing the Ash Grove in Los Angeles. So we get there to Los Angeles, and they're still playing the Ash Grove. So we go in this club, and it doesn't take me too long to get myself acquainted with other mandolin players and so forth. So I meet Ralph Rensler, and it wasn't any time at all I'm up on stage jamming with him. So here comes Douglas up on stage jamming with him. Here comes Rodney, sick or not. Here he comes with the guitar. And
Is that how it worked?
yeah, we all got on stage, and so there was a guy in town named Jim Dixon, who was a Elektra Records producer. So he saw us the first night. He liked what we did. I don't know if he talked to us or not.
Well, he went on to
Anyway,
call the Birds.
He brings the boss in the next night, and they sign us to a record contract.
Well, actually, it wasn't exactly like that day.
Well, but that's basically what happened.
Well, I know. But there were just a couple other things that happened.
Carry on.
Actually, don't you remember we were there and Jack Holtzman from Elektra Records were there?
Yeah.
And he came up and said, would you guys like to make a record? And we said, how much would it cost us? And
Douglas, we'd been there doing the first session we were doing, and Douglas has got his pipe in his mouth, smoking it, while he's playing these banjo tunes, and Holtzman couldn't believe what he was seeing. Douglas is smoking.
I got my first reality check at Record Presidents. We were doing a session, and I didn't know anything about recording, but Douglas and I used to record in the bathroom at home because it sounded good. It was one of those, tile rooms. Well, we made a few records that way, didn't we, when we were young? And we went in there, and we were doing this session, and I said, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and Dixon said, well, you just set it the way you want to. So I went in. But before that, the president came in and says, well, this is the way you make a record, and he set all the mics up and everything. He says, no, that's the way you record this kind of music. He was from New York. And so he left, and I went in and changed all the microphones and changed all the sound, and he came back in after we recorded 5 or 6 songs. He says, see, I know my business. So I thought, record exec, I got your number. But that's how we got started. They put an ad in Variety that we had signed with
Elektra.
With Elektra Records. It says these weird-looking guys from the Ozarks signed this record deal with Elektra Records. And Andy's people saw it. They were sitting there going, gee, where could we find a bunch of weird-looking guys? Oh, look, weird-looking guys from the Ozarks. And they said, let's have them come over and audition. And we did. Now, somebody who knows it, it's hard for me to remember because I was so scared that all I could see and feel was adrenaline. What exactly happened, Dean?
You mean when we went over to the studio?
Yeah, no.
We go over to Desilu.
Yes,
on the set. They're doing, one of the Griffith episodes or whatever. So they stopped during the time they were having a break, and Andy has us, well, play something. So we played like a half a tune, and he said, that's it, that's what I'm looking for. The look, and I like the way you guys played, and so that's it.
That's right. When he said that's it, I thought, oh, they're throwing us out. I thought, oh, what am I going to tell Mom? And he threw us out of Desilu.
But they kept you, of course.
Yes, they
My
did.
great aunt said,
Now-
you boys are going a long way to flop.
She said that.
So now,
She didn't want us to leave.
so now we have the Darling Boys in place. Jim Fritzell and Evergreen Bombs had this concept of a mountain family, and these four fit the image of the boys who would make up the Darling family. We need the Darling girl now. Maggie, tell us where you were born and the occupation and name of your parents.
All right, I was born in Greeley, Colorado. I'm not going to tell you the year.
That's okay.
It was in the 40s.
Your age, Maggie.
My dad was a doctor, and my mom was a housewife, and I'm the youngest of 4 children. We always had a lot of music in the house. My dad had worked his way through medical school playing the banjo. It was sort of a Dixieland-style banjo. And one time we went back to Polk, Nebraska. There's some folks from Nebraska. And they went and took pictures of Polk, Nebraska and sent them to me last week, which is great. But we went back to visit the grandparents, and my brother Jim found Daddy's banjo under the feather bed at Grandma Peterson's, took it out, fell in love, and then he started playing the banjo. So there were 2 neighbor kids down the block. One played drums, one played piano, and we started playing. We became the Jada Quartet. We just thought we were, I don't know what we thought. We didn't think, actually. You just did it when you're a kid, and they say do it, you do it, and, you know. So we got a job up in the mountains in Estes Park, Colorado. This was 1954. And the record company, Capitol Records, came out to have a convention. So all these stars came out from New York City to the weird mountains in Colorado at Stanley Hotel. Dick Link happened to be a record executive, and I remember Peggy Lee and Francis Faye and the guy that made all the voices, Mel Blanc was there. He was running off the diving board making the Donald Duck sound, and here we were, the little Jadas.
You make the Donald Duck sound?
Yeah, oh, he was great. You know, he was running around the hotel. But anyway, that's how I met Dick Link, and we were playing in the Lariat Lounge in the evening. I was taking care of the children in the daytime at the swimming pool, and then working. And I don't know, it just got out of hand. The people just loved us. My brother played the banjo, and so people were waiting in line to come up and see the Jadas. So the record people saw this. Of course, I was in junior high. But Dick Link said, "Well, if you ever get to New York, look me up." You know, Dick Link, always straightening his tie. Well, that's all it took. Then I just had to wait till I graduated from high school. I went to New York, looked him up, and from then he about the same time he was finding Andy Griffith, 1954, 55, in that same area. So I knew Andy a long time.
And then when this script came along, Dick contacted you.
That's right. I had another group, and we were working the circuit, Playboy clubs, and Arizona and Nevada and all over the place. And this part came up. It wasn't written for me, but it was written for a mountain girl who had brothers, made music. Well, all that fit. So they flew over. Dick came and brought Sheldon Leonard and Aaron Rubin and Bob Sweeney and Andy. They all came over to see me in Scottsdale, and they said, "She's the gal." So that's how I got the part.
All right, all the pieces are together with the exception of the father. And Denver Pyle is hired to play Briscoe Darling. Now, this would be the 3rd season of the Andy Griffith Show. On March 18th, 1963, The Darlings Are Coming was shown for the first time. We're going to see the opening scene, and it's going to be right.
Ooh, sure is boiling, Paul.
This machine is half mad with thirst.
How much you gonna take, Paul?
She's always good for 11 hats.
Now, on behalf of the fans, my feeling sitting here with you is it's hard for me to imagine. I can see these characters who I've watched all my life, and I look right here, and here you are. Isn't that wonderful? Maggie, you had not acted much before this, had you?
Oh, no.
How did you? How were you able to act that well?
Well, no, actually. It was just all so funny. Do you remember?
Yes.
We all just laughed when we read that script around that table that day. I'll never forget that. Never laughed so hard in my life. It just kind of came out. I don't know.
Were you nervous? Can you remember
Oh, no.
your feelings? Were you
Wasn't
nervous at all when the cameras were rolling?
Not this. We weren't. I was nervous when we went to the reading, but then it got so funny, and it was. We fell in love like we were brothers. Oh yeah.
I'm really glad to remember all our lines.
So it just kind of, I don't know, it just seemed so natural. I don't know. When we got on the set, it just was fun.
And I think that natural feeling played over into what you see on the screen. The chemistry was there almost immediately. Now, this goes into crawling out the window. That's what I call this scene. I had to show this too. When Briscoe checks into the motel, and you'll see what happens next. Ken?
Now, here she comes. Slack off. Slack off. I gave you Paul. I hit your space.
So Mitch is about to kill Briscoe with his bass guitar, or bass, trying to get it in the window.
Well, here with me all together again.
Not quite, Paul.
Huh?
Other's still down there.
So he be. Didn't even miss him. Don't have much personality, that boy.
In the roof in there, Andy, with at least 5 instruments. Now, the law says 1 occupant to a single room.
I know who they are. I warned them earlier today on 907.
Dipping a hat in a horse trough.
Right.
Well?
There's a mess of them in there, all right. Well,
I got suspicious right off when that Mr. Darling asked me was I on duty all the time. That must have been when he sneaked the others in while I was out eating supper.
Good thinking, John.
Howdy. Who do you think you're kidding with that jug playing?
That's mighty fine jugging, Mr. Darling.
Thank you. I can get banjo sounds, guitar sounds, whatever I want out of it.
Where's the rest of the family? I mean, you're a mighty fine jug player, but I doubt there's a pair of lips around with that much versatility.
You don't believe I can get banjo sounds out of this jug?
No.
Man's entitled to his opinion.
So we cut the scene there with Mr. Masters knocking on the door outside the Darling's room. Andy standing out in the back alley as the rope is lowered down. And Dean comes out the window and Andy takes him in his arm. Sets him down, tells him to be quiet. Down comes Mitch. And finally Charlene. And Andy, Andy's holding her.
tree.
You're down, Miss Charlene.
How about if I shimmy up and come back down again?
Darling,
Yeah, Paul?
put that boy down.
This episode, of course, featured music by the Dillards. We're going to see now their first really long or complete musical performance. This happens after Andy has offered them the hospitality of a jail cell. So, Ken?
Pop. Thank you very much.
Charlene, let your old pa have that heel.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, you're a pretty young one, aren't you? How'd you like the white beans, Mr. Briscoe?
They was good.
Well, you didn't say anything.
He ate 4 bowls.
And eating speaks louder than words.
You told him to say that, didn't you?
That's a very famous saying.
Oh? I stay in the house too much. Well, good night, all. Nice seeing you.
Good night, Andy. I'll be home after a while.
That many sheriffs has got as nice an aunt as that.
She does very well.
Kevin, 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, let him play. Town don't officially close down till 10:30.
Well, in that case, we'll scrub one off for you. You like tearing up your old clothes for rags?
Oh, yeah. Mind if I play along with you?
I didn't know you sprang.
A little. What kick?
Just jump in where you can and hang on. Come on, come on, shoot.
So the Darling Boys and Andy are playing in the jail cell. Briscoe on the jug, Andy with the guitar, and Charlene setting up on the, I guess it's the bed right there beside him. Dean's playing the mandolin. Charlene puts her foot over on Andy's leg. He looks up at her and she winks. He slides his leg out from under her. That's a call.
How was the music recorded for the show? What we see, you were not playing then. So could you tell us how the music was recorded?
Yes, we went to a place called Glen Glen Sound. Glen Glen Sound Studios, where they did a lot of the what they call the voiceovers and things like that. If they needed to wild track something, which means if the dialogue was messed up or they didn't get a good sound on it, the actor would go in with a microphone and watch a big screen like this and follow his own lips and dub his part. And that's where they did all this sort of things, and that's where we did our music. And it was a huge, huge studio. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times bigger than this, when you say. And they pulled, was it 2 microphones, Dean? Do you remember? So it's either 1 or 2 microphones, and we cut it live. There was no doing the tracks and then doing the voices like they do today. We did it all at once, didn't we? And we didn't do it very many times.
You know, on that tape that I have in my little, to get our keys, it says, "Okay, kids, take 8." And then we did Salty Dog.
It was take 8. Wow. Anyway, we record it like that, and then when we get into the scene and they'd have the camera running, they'd say, "Okay, playback." And then somebody would say, "Speed." And they'd say, "Rolling." Down, 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 down. And then we would actually lip sync. So all that you see is lip sync.
I want to add something. I have all those old transcriptions.
You do?
Yes, I do. How about that?
We have stuff. Could be your stuff. But I got to tell you a couple of things that we have. These guys, just for fun of it, would go in and Douglas would either play a different banjo one time and then another banjo, or for those aficionados who watched everything, if it was played in one key, Douglas would capo it up and play in it. It looked like he was playing in another key.
Rodney, what about the jug playing? Of course, that jug sound was prominent in the soundtrack.
You notice
How did you feel about that?
Well, you notice it was in the first episode. And being a young kid at that time, I can't believe I did this. I started complaining about the jug being too loud. You know, because all you could hear when it first came over the air was wasn't bad, was it? And so I think I told Andy about it on the second, or at one point, and they actually pulled it down a little bit. But in the first episode, those sound mixers had it just a little too hot.
And it was actually someone playing water bottles or water glasses.
Well, Hollywood jug player.
Yeah.
Well, what it was is they just filled different bottles with different tones. So, yeah. So you get different tones out of bottles that were filled with different levels of water.
Maggie, I love that wink. Isn't she adorable doing that? Isn't she wonderful? Now, did the director, or was it written in the script that you were to put your foot on Andy's knee? Do you remember anything about that?
Well, acting.
And then the
acting.
second question I have, and if you'll answer this too, it starts with just a shot of your foot on Andy's knee, and then the camera pans up. How did you know when the camera was on your face and it was time to do the wink?
Well, you know that because you can see them doing it, and I think that was all in one take. But they wanted me to do it, so I thought, okay. I mean, I don't think that was ad lib. I think they had that in.
It's wonderful. I love seeing it every time I see it.
Wow, that leg, isn't that leg great?
You know, what amazed me, Neil, about this is when I first met Maggie on that first show, I thought she was a famous Hollywood actress. I didn't know that was her first time acting. You know, I was very intimidated by the fact that how well she had done for somebody who's not been in front of the camera like that.
I asked Everett Greenbaum one time why the Darling boys didn't talk, and he said because they were musicians, and when Jim and I wrote the script, we didn't want to give them lines because we didn't know if they could act, and it worked to their advantage, and we never gave them much dialogue. You just heard great beans, that type of thing, and that's it. All right, now the next, and let me ask you this. What was the reaction when this was shown? Mitch, do you remember what was the reaction from your friends, the public? What was your feeling about this after you saw the episode?
Well, of course, back home, everybody was just absolutely amazed. It was the finest thing that had ever happened. Four boys went off and got a job on the one show that everybody watched in the Ozarks.
They let out the National Guard early to go home and watch it.
And do you remember how you felt that first, when it was getting ready to come on? Were y'all excited? Did you watch it at home? Do you remember any of your feelings when you knew it was about to come on the air for the first time?
Oh my gosh, I was working in Scottsdale, Arizona at the Executive House and with my other group. And the night before it came, I didn't think much about it. We did it, it was so much fun. And then you just go on with your life, and then all of a sudden, my gosh, it's going to be on. I remember the night before, I had this terrible nightmare that it didn't go on, and that everything went wrong and all of this stuff. But then the night it played, I had to work that night, and they put it in the lounge where we were working, and it was the response was just overwhelming. I couldn't really believe it. And from home too. I mean, all my family and all my friends and everybody. It was just like a magic thing happened. Did you find that reaction?
I don't know where I was when I had to be with you guys because we had to be working. Do you remember, Dean?
No, I don't remember. We saw it at some point, but I don't know if we saw it live or a tape or what. I can't recall.
I saw it. No, it was thrilling. You remember that?
What?
Where we were. Anything.
You remember seeing it live.
All right. Well, folks, I hope you have been enjoying this. This is some amazing material, and I cannot thank Neil Brower enough for letting me share this. And I also can't thank Neil and Pat Coleman, who are the ones that actually videoed this entire lecture that was done at Mayberry Days, if I didn't say that earlier. Mayberry Days 2004, Professor Brower's lecture. So if you're at Mayberry Days, make sure you go to Professor Brower's lecture, because these are the kind of things you will hear if you go there. So at Mayberry Days, every year, Neil does an amazing lecture. A lot of years he has cast members there with him. Other years he's just there and presents an episode and talks about it. Either one, they're amazing to see, and you would definitely enjoy them. And I know you've got to be enjoying this, because I'm sitting here and I've seen this several times, and every time I watch or I hear something different, I see something different. So I want to encourage you. You're probably listening to these. Most people listen to the podcast. There are video versions of these podcasts, and I want to encourage you to consider going and watching them, because you can see them talking and you get to see their interaction with one another. And I just think it's special. Now, there were clips on this week's episode from the Andy Griffith Show. They were not the entire clip that they were actually shown during the live version of these interviews. I tried I clipped them down. So I did like TV Land and everybody else. I toned down the clips because some of the clips were actually 5 or 6 minutes long. And, there's fair use, which I hope I met, because we were discussing the things you will be able to see tonight or hear. And I think that was fine. But if you start stretching those clips out to being too long and having them here online, I think we could get in some trouble. So hopefully I met the requirement for fair use, because we're doing commentary on these particular episodes with these amazing cast members that were on those episodes. And yet I still think I captured what the spirit of the clip that was being shown was. So hopefully nobody will get on to me for clipping stuff like TV Land. Everybody does. All right, folks, I hope you have enjoyed this. Don't forget, there's 2 more parts to this series of interviews that we're doing with the Darling Boys, and I would love to hear from you. So if you'll give me a call at 888-684-8415 and let me know what you think. I've got some amazing stuff that Neil Brower mailed to me that I'll share with you on the last episode probably, or maybe the one following that, about some feedback he got about this particular set of interviews back in 2004. You're not going to want to miss those. So I would love to hear from you. Again, call me, 888-684-8415. Let me hear what you think. You can also email me, send me things if you want to. I'll take it however I can get it. And folks, I will look forward to seeing you here again next week for 2 Chairs No Waiting, your Mayberry podcast. Have a great week.